Nobody showed up when my mom was dying. My husband demanded $15,000 anyway. I gave him my answer, and what happened next still shocks me to this day. The ICU hallway at Mercy General smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I had been sitting in that same plastic chair for 14 hours straight, watching nurses rush in and out of my mother's room. Mama Claire had suffered a massive stroke the night before, and the doctors kept using words like critical and uncertain and prepare yourself. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee cup. I kept thinking someone would show up. My husband, my mother-in-law, anyone from the family I'd been supporting for 7 years. But the only person who came was me. I stared at my phone, reading the last message I'd sent to Darius hours ago. Mom's in the ICU. She might not make it. Please come. 3 little dots had appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. Radio silence from the man who promised to be there in sickness and in health. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed like angry insects, and somewhere down the hall, a machine beeped its steady rhythm of someone else's emergency. I felt so completely alone in that moment that I almost didn't hear my phone vibrate. Almost. The text that appeared on my screen made my blood run cold. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even asking about my mother. It was a demand. Transfer $15,000 now. Monique needs the venue deposit, and Mom wants to book her healing retreat in the Maldives. Don't be difficult about this, Z. I'm counting on you. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. My mother was fighting for her life 20 feet away, and he was asking for vacation money. Something inside my chest cracked open, and I felt this strange, cold clarity wash over me. This wasn't a marriage. This was a transaction I'd been losing for years. And right there, in that hospital hallway that smelled like bleach and broken promises, I decided I was done losing. This is a long story, and honestly, I'll need friends to get through telling it. If you want to see how this all played out, make sure you're following along here. You won't want to miss what comes next. The thing about being the family ATM is that people stop seeing you as human. They see you as a resource, a problem solver, a wallet with legs. I'd been that wallet for 7 years, ever since Darius and I got married when I was 27 and stupid enough to think love meant sacrifice. I met Darius at a corporate networking event. He was charming, smooth-talking, always knew exactly what to say to make me feel special. He worked in sales, or so he said, though the paychecks were always mysteriously delayed or smaller than expected. His mother, Geneva, was a church lady with expensive tastes and a talent for making me feel guilty about every dollar I earned. His baby sister Monique was 24 going on 12, completely convinced the world owed her a fairy tale life funded by someone else's bank account. And me? I was the CFO of a mid-sized tech consulting firm, pulling in a comfortable 6 figures, and somehow convinced that supporting my husband's family was what good wives did. I paid for the 4-bedroom house in the nice neighborhood. I covered the lease on both luxury SUVs. I sent Geneva $2, $500 every single month, like clockwork. I'd already dropped $30 dollars on Monique's wedding planning, from the engagement party to the designer dress fittings. The night before my mother's stroke, I'd been going over our finances, and the numbers had made my stomach hurt. Over the past 7 years, I'd transferred over $400 to Darius and his family. $400,000. That money could have bought a vacation home, could have secured my mother's retirement. Instead, it had vanished into Geneva's shopping sprees and Darius's mysterious business ventures that never quite materialized. But I'd told myself it was fine. Family takes care of family, right? That's what Geneva always said when she needed another cash infusion. That's what Darius whispered when he kissed my forehead and promised he'd pay me back someday. Sitting in that hospital, staring at his text demanding more money while my mother's heart monitor beeped weakly in the background, I finally saw the truth I'd been avoiding. They didn't love me, they loved my money. And the second I stopped being useful, I'd be as disposable as an empty bank account. My hands were steadier than I expected when I opened my banking app. I typed in $50, dangerous $0, and hit transfer. $50, not 15,000, 50. Then I added a message that felt like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. This is for you to buy some data. Don't ever call me again. My phone started ringing immediately. Darius. Then Geneva. Then Monique. The screen lit up over and over like a slot machine, but I just sat there watching it buzz against the armrest of my chair. Each ignored call felt like taking back a piece of myself I'd given away too easily. I waited until the ringing stopped, then I made a different call, one I should have made years ago. Mr. Harrison answered on the second ring. He'd been my father's attorney before Daddy passed, and he'd handled my prenup with Darius. I remembered how he'd looked at me during that signing, this knowing sadness in his eyes, like he could already see how this story would end. I explained everything in a voice that didn't shake once. My mother in the ICU, Darius's text, the years of financial abuse I'd finally decided to name for what it was. Mr. Harrison listened without interrupting, and when I finished, I heard him actually chuckle. I've been waiting for this call for 7 years, Zuri. Tell me what you need. What I needed was simple. I needed to stop the bleeding, freeze every joint account, cancel every automatic transfer, put the house on the market immediately. I wanted my money protected before Darius and his family could drain another cent. Mr. Harrison promised to have the paperwork filed within the hour. Before we hung up, he said something that made tears finally spill down my cheeks. Your father would be so proud of you right now. Daddy had never liked Darius. He'd been too polite to say it directly, but I'd seen it in the way his jaw tightened whenever Darius talked about his big plans and bright future. Daddy died 2 years into my marriage, and sometimes I wondered if the stress of watching me throw my life away had contributed to his heart attack. That thought hurt more than anything Darius had ever done to me. I wiped my eyes and looked at my phone. The $15 wasn't $1 Darius wanted. I had a better use for it. I pulled up the website for Little Angels Foundation, a charity that funded heart surgeries for children whose families couldn't afford the procedures. The homepage showed a little girl named Maya, 6 years old, smiling despite the tubes in her nose. She needed surgery within the month or she'd die. The cost? $5,000. I entered $15,000 into the donation field. In the special dedication section, I typed, "In honor of Mama Clara's strength and recovery." Then I took a screenshot of the confirmation page and opened the family group chat, the one Geneva had created where she posted prayer requests and shopping hauls and photos of Monique's wedding planning. I'd been mostly silent in that chat for months, just watching their lives scroll by while I paid the bills in the background. I sent the screenshot with no explanation, just the image of my $15,000 donation to save children's lives. Then I turned off my phone completely and went back into my mother's room. Mama Clara looked so small in that hospital bed, so fragile. But her hand was warm when I held it, and her fingers squeezed mine gently like she knew I needed the comfort more than she did. I leaned close and whispered what I'd done, how I'd finally stood up for myself, how I'd donated money in her name to help babies live. Somewhere outside that quiet room, I knew chaos was erupting. But in that moment, holding my mother's hand and feeling the weight of 7 years of servitude finally lift off my shoulders, I felt nothing but peace. What I didn't know was that the chaos was far worse than I'd imagined. Geneva's scream could probably be heard from space. I found out later what happened at the bridal boutique, and honestly, I wish I could have been there to see it. Geneva and Monique had walked into Belle Marie, this ultra-exclusive bridal salon where appointments cost $500 just to browse. They were there for Monique's final dress fitting, a custom gown I'd already put $8 down on, confident and smiling like they owned the place. Geneva handed over her Black American Express card with that smug little flourish she always did, the one that said, "I have money and you should be impressed." The sales associate swiped it, waited, then swiped it again. Her smile got tighter. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Walker, but this card is being declined." Geneva had laughed, actually laughed, like it was the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard. "That's impossible. Try again." 3 more attempts, 3 more declines. Then Geneva tried her backup card. Declined. Her emergency credit card. Also declined. According to my friend Shanice, who worked at the boutique, Geneva's face had gone from confident to confused to absolutely purple with rage in about 90 seconds. She'd started yelling about system errors and incompetent staff, making a scene so big that other customers started filming on their phones. That's when Monique's phone rang, the venue coordinator from Sapphire Gardens, the place where her dream wedding was supposed to happen in 6 weeks. "Ms. Walker, it's now 12:37 p.m. We still haven't received the $15 deposit. Per our contract, we're releasing your date to another party. Additionally, Ms. Zuri Chambers' legal team has contacted us to formally withdraw all financial guarantees associated with your event. I heard Monique's scream was even louder than her mother's. Everything unraveled so fast after that. The boutique manager asked them to leave, explaining that without payment, they couldn't take the dress. The dress Monique had been planning her entire personality around for 8 months. Security had to escort them out, while other brides-to-be whispered and recorded the whole meltdown. Geneva called Darius from the parking lot, absolutely hysterical. He was at his mother's house, probably planning how to spend the $15,000 he thought was coming. When he checked his account balance, he saw $1,250. His mother's account showed 5. 0. The automatic transfers I'd set up years ago, the ones that had been feeding them every month like clockwork, all stopped. Every single one. That's when Darius saw the notification, the one I'd posted in the family group chat. The screenshot of my $15,000 donation to Little Angels Foundation. He'd called me 17 times in 3 minutes, left voicemails that went from confused to angry to absolutely unhinged. But my phone was off, and I was sitting peacefully next to my mother's bed, listening to her breathing steady and strong. The best part? The part that still makes me smile. Little Angels Foundation posted about the donation on their social media that same day. They put up photos of 3 children who would now get their life-saving surgeries, and they thanked the anonymous donor who'd given in honor of Mama Clara's recovery. They added, "We're praying for Mama Clara's full healing." That post went viral. Absolutely viral. Got picked up by local news, shared thousands of times, even made it onto some feel-good morning shows. Everyone was talking about the generous mystery donor who'd given $15,000 to save children's lives while their own mother was fighting in the ICU. Geneva's church friends saw it. Her prayer circle saw it. Her entire social network saw it. And they all started commenting, messaging her directly. "Your daughter-in-law is such a blessing. Such a godly woman. You must be so proud. But Geneva, why didn't you tell us Monique's wedding was canceled? Is everything okay? I heard you all were having financial troubles. Do you need help from the church fund?" Their dirty laundry got aired in real time, and the only person who looked good in the story was me. The generous daughter-in-law. The faithful Christian. The woman who gave away a fortune while her family was in crisis. Geneva and Darius tried to do damage control, but it was too late. The narrative was set. They looked like ungrateful monsters, and I looked like a saint. By the time they made it to Mercy General Hospital around 3 p.m., security already had their names on a list. I'd called ahead and specifically requested that Darius Walker, Geneva Walker, and Monique Walker be denied visitation rights to Mama Clara's room. The hospital took it seriously because I was listed as Mama Clara's medical power of attorney and primary emergency contact. I wasn't there to see it, but the nurse told me later they'd made a huge scene at the reception desk, threatening legal action, demanding to see me, screaming about their rights. Security had physically removed them from the building and told them if they came back, they'd be arrested for trespassing. They went home to regroup, except home wasn't really home anymore. When they pulled up to the house on Silver Lake Boulevard, the one I'd bought with my down payment and my mortgage payments for 7 years, there were 2 very official-looking men in suits waiting on the porch, attorneys from Harrison Legal Group, holding a folder thick with documents. Notice to vacate in 14 days. The property was officially listed for sale, effective immediately. Everything inside that house that I'd purchased was documented, photographed, and legally mine. They could take their personal belongings and whatever gifts they'd bought with their own money, which amounted to basically nothing. Darius tried to argue. Tried to say he had rights as my husband. That's when Mr. Harrison's associate pulled out the prenuptial agreement, the one Darius had signed while barely reading because he was so excited to marry the woman with the executive salary. The prenup had an infidelity clause he'd completely forgotten about. If either party cheated, they forfeited all claim to marital assets. Remember Jasmine? The woman Darius had been seeing on and off for 2 years? Yeah, I'd known about her for a while. Had the texts, the hotel receipts, everything. I'd just been too tired to fight about it before. Now those receipts were exhibits A through K in my divorce filing. The lawyers left them standing on the lawn in a daze. But the day wasn't over yet. The repo trucks arrived at 4:30 p.m. Two flatbed tow trucks, bright and official, there to collect the luxury SUVs I'd been leasing in my name. The Range Rover Geneva drove like it was her birthright, the Escalade. Darius used to pick up his side pieces, both hooked up and hauled away while neighbors watched from their windows and whispered behind their blinds. Geneva, Darius, and Monique stood on the curb with no cars, no money, and a 14-day countdown to homelessness. Everything they'd built their entire lifestyle around had disappeared in less than 4 hours. I got the text from Mr. Harrison at 5:15 p.m. while I was feeding Mama Clara ice chips. It's done. They're finished. How are you feeling? I looked at my mother, who was awake now and watching me with those knowing eyes that had seen me through every heartbreak and triumph of my life. I felt free for the first time in 7 years. The thing nobody tells you about revenge is how quiet it feels when it's over. No dramatic music, no slow-motion victory walk. Just you and your choices, and the aftermath spreading out in every direction like ripples in dark water. I stayed at the hospital with Mama Clara for 6 more days. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, talking about physical therapy and rehabilitation timelines. Every evening, I'd sit by her bed reading her favorite Toni Morrison novels out loud, and every evening my phone would buzz with messages I didn't read and calls I didn't answer. On day 3, I finally turned my phone back on long enough to check the damage. There were 147 unread messages, 73 missed calls, voicemails that ranged from begging to threatening to absolutely delusional. Darius's first messages were confused. "Baby, what's going on? Call me back. This is crazy." Then angry. "You froze our accounts? You donated our money? Who do you think you are?" Then desperate. "Ziri, please. We can talk about this. I love you. We need you." Geneva's messages were more direct. She'd never been good at hiding what she really thought of me. "You ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you, you'll burn in hell for this." Monique just sent crying emojis and dramatic voice notes about her ruined life, and how could I do this to her on her special day? I deleted everything without reading most of it. Then I blocked all 3 of their numbers. That simple action, just pressing block and watching their names disappear from my contacts, felt like exhaling after holding my breath underwater for years. Mr. Harrison kept me updated on the legal proceedings. The divorce papers were filed and served. Darius tried to contest it, of course, claimed I was being irrational and emotional, and that we could work things out in counseling. But the prenup was ironclad, and the evidence of his affair with Jasmine was undeniable. His lawyer basically told him to take whatever settlement I offered and count himself lucky. I offered him nothing. Not $1, not one piece of furniture, nothing. The prenup stated clearly that in case of infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeited all claims to marital assets. Darius had signed away his future the moment he started sleeping with Jasmine at the Holiday Inn Express off Highway 95. The house sold faster than I expected. A young couple with tech money offered $50 Wozen dollars over asking price, cash deal, close in 30 days. I accepted immediately. Geneva, Darius, and Monique had to find somewhere else to live within 2 weeks, and from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, it wasn't going well. They'd moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the sketchy part of town, the kind of place Geneva used to drive past with her nose in the air while saying, "Thank God we don't live like that." Now they were living exactly like that, splitting one bathroom and arguing over who got the pull-out couch. Geneva had to get a job. Actual employment for the first time in 15 years. She was working at a diner called Rosie's, doing the breakfast shift, serving eggs and coffee to people who didn't know she used to spend $500 on brunch every Sunday. I heard she cried in the walk-in freezer during her first week when a customer complained about her service, and she couldn't just walk away. Monique got hired at the same diner, working evenings. Her engagement fell apart almost immediately after the wedding cancellation. Her fiancé Brandon had been perfectly happy marrying into money and status, but marrying into poverty and public humiliation, that wasn't part of his plan. He broke up with her via text message while she was wiping down tables at Rosie's, which felt like poetry. Darius had it worst of all. His sales job turned out to be as fake as most things about him. He'd been let go months earlier and just never told me, living off my money while pretending to go to work every day. Without my income or my house or my cars, he had no choice but to take the first job he could find. He ended up working construction, doing manual labor for $16 an hour, which was probably the first honest work he'd done in a decade. I heard about all of this through Shanice, who heard it from her cousin who worked at Rosie's. She'd send me updates like she was narrating a nature documentary. Geneva dropped a whole tray of plates today and had a meltdown. Monique got into a screaming match with a customer. Darius showed up to pick them up after work, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years. I didn't feel bad. I kept waiting for the guilt to hit, for that voice in my head to say you went too far, you destroyed them. But that voice never came. All I felt was relief. Mama Clara was discharged from the hospital after 2 weeks. I'd already rented a beautiful apartment near the medical center, a spacious 2-bedroom with huge windows and a view of the city skyline. I hired a private nurse to help with her recovery and a physical therapist to come 3 times a week. Money I would have wasted on Darius's imaginary business ventures or Monique's princess fantasies went toward actually caring for someone I loved. Mama Clara was getting stronger every day. Her speech came back almost completely. Her mobility improved steadily. And every morning, she'd sit in her favorite chair by the window with her coffee and smile at me like I'd hung the moon. "You did good, baby girl," she told me one morning. "I'm proud of you. That meant more than any revenge ever could." But I wasn't done yet. Because while my personal life was settling into something peaceful and healthy, my professional life was about to take off in ways I never imagined. I'd been working at my consulting firm for 9 years, steadily climbing the ladder, making smart decisions, bringing in major clients. But I'd always felt held back somehow, like I was managing other people's visions instead of building my own. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I handed in my resignation. My boss tried to convince me to stay, offered me a promotion and a raise, but I'd already made up my mind. I was starting my own firm, Chambers Consulting Group, specializing in financial strategy for small to medium businesses, especially those owned by women and people of color who'd been overlooked by traditional firms. I had enough money saved up from selling the house and from my own accounts that Darius had never touched. I had connections and clients who trusted me, and I had something I'd never had before: absolute clarity about what I wanted and who I was. Within 6 months, Chambers Consulting Group was thriving. I'd landed 5 major clients, hired 3 amazing employees, and was being featured in business magazines as a rising star in the industry. People wanted to work with someone who'd walked through fire and came out stronger. I started doing interviews, telling my story in vague terms. Successful businesswoman leaves toxic marriage, starts over, builds empire. People ate it up. I got invited to speak at conferences, to mentor young women, to sit on panels about financial independence and self-worth. And through all of it, I kept donating to Little Angels Foundation. Every quarter, I'd send them a check with Mama Clara's name on it. They'd send photos of the kids who'd been helped, these beautiful children with scars on their chests and smiles on their faces. Each one reminded me why I'd made the choice I did. 7 months after the divorce, I got a call from Darius. He'd somehow gotten my new number, probably through mutual acquaintances who didn't know better. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. "Zuri, I messed up. I know that now. I want you to know I'm sorry." I sat there in my beautiful office, looking out at the city skyline, and I felt absolutely nothing for this man who'd once been my whole world. "I appreciate that," I said calmly, "but an apology doesn't change what you did. Or who you are. Can we at least talk? Meet for coffee? I'm different now. I've learned my lesson." I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "No, Darius, we can't. You had 7 years to learn. You chose not to." I hung up before he could respond. Then I blocked the new number and went back to work. What I didn't know was that the story wasn't quite over yet. 8 months after I left Darius, I was standing in the customs line at JFK International Airport, waiting for Mama Clara to clear through with her luggage. We'd just spent 3 weeks in Europe, first-class tickets, 5-star hotels, the kind of trip Geneva used to dream about taking on my dime. Instead, I'd given it to the woman who actually deserved it. Paris had been beautiful. Mama Clara had cried at the Eiffel Tower, held my hand as we walked through the Louvre, eaten croissants every morning like they were going out of style. In Switzerland, we'd stayed in a resort overlooking the Alps, and she joked that the chocolate alone was worth the flight. She looked healthier than she had in years. glowing and happy and alive. We were waiting for her wheelchair to come through baggage claim when my phone buzzed. A text from Shanice. "Girl, you need to see this. Check your email." I opened my inbox and saw a forwarded article from the local business journal. The headline made my stomach drop. Former husband of Businesswoman of the Year speaks out, claims he was the real brains behind success story. I clicked the link and started reading. Darius had given an interview. An actual interview, complete with photos of him looking haggard and victimized, talking about how he'd supported my career from the beginning, how I'd stolen his ideas for my consulting firm, how I'd ruined his life out of spite and jealousy. He'd twisted the whole narrative, painted himself as the devoted husband who'd sacrificed everything while I climbed the corporate ladder on his back. According to his version of events, I'd frozen him out financially as punishment for suggesting we needed better boundaries with my mother. He claimed the $15 $100 donation was a manipulative move to make him look bad in public. There was even a quote from Geneva, playing the heartbroken mother-in-law. Zuri changed after she got successful. She forgot where she came from. We loved her like our own daughter, and she threw us away like garbage. I sat there in the airport, reading this absolute fiction about my own life, and something inside me just snapped. Not anger, something colder, something more calculated. I called Mr. Harrison right there in the terminal. "I need you to prepare a press statement. And I need you to do it now." For the next 2 hours, while Mama Clara napped in the airport lounge, I worked with Mr. Harrison to craft a response. Not emotional, not defensive, just facts. Cold, hard, documented facts. We released the statement that evening through my company's official channels. It included copies of bank statements showing exactly where my money had gone over 7 years, screenshots of text messages where Darius demanded cash, the prenuptial agreement with the infidelity clause clearly highlighted, testimonies from colleagues proving I'd built my business entirely independently, and the hospital records from the night Mama Clara was in the ICU, time-stamped to show exactly when Darius had sent that text demanding money while I sat alone in the emergency room. But the piece that really destroyed him? We included the timeline of his affair with Jasmine. Not just the dates, but the expenses. The hotel rooms I'd unknowingly paid for, the dinners, the weekend trips. Every receipt had my credit card number on it. He'd been using my money to wine and dine another woman for 2 full years. The article went viral instantly, shared millions of times across social media. Business journalists picked it up, morning shows started calling. The narrative flipped so fast that Darius didn't have time to spin it. By the next morning, he'd lost his construction job. The company didn't want the publicity associated with a man who'd become the poster child for financial abuse and adultery. Geneva got fired from Rosie's too after customers started recognizing her and leaving 1-star reviews online. Monique's dating profile got flooded with messages from people telling her she was just like her toxic family. They'd tried to destroy my reputation to salvage theirs. Instead, they'd guaranteed their own complete social destruction. But here's the thing I hadn't expected. I found out why Darius had really married me in the first place. 2 weeks after the article came out, I got a call from a woman named Patricia. She'd seen the news coverage and felt compelled to reach out. Patricia had dated Darius years before I met him. She'd been a pharmaceutical sales rep, made decent money, and he'd charmed his way into her life the same way he'd charmed into mine. According to Patricia, Darius had a pattern. He targeted successful women, married them, or moved in with them, lived off their money until they got wise, then moved on to the next target. I was number 3. Patricia was number 2. A woman named Michelle was number 1. He'd drained Patricia's savings over 3 years before she kicked him out. Michelle had filed for bankruptcy after their divorce. I was just the latest mark in a long con. And the only difference was I'd had enough money and enough sense to fight back before he completely destroyed me. Patricia sent me screenshots of old texts where Darius had used the exact same lines on her that he'd used on me. The exact same promises, the exact same manipulation tactics. Word for word, like he was reading from a script. "I'm telling you this," Patricia wrote, "when biamasam mayinsames pamaru, because you deserve to know you weren't naive. He's just that good at what he does." I thanked her for reaching out, then I added her evidence to my legal files. Mr. Harrison suggested we could pursue criminal fraud charges if I wanted. I thought about it for a long time. Thought about dragging Darius through court. making him face actual prison time instead of just social consequences. In the end, I decided against it. Not because I forgave him, not because I thought he deserved mercy, but because pursuing him further would have meant keeping him in my life, and I was done giving him any piece of my energy. Instead, I had Mr. Harrison send one final legal letter, a cease and desist, barring Darius, Geneva, and Monique from ever publicly speaking about me again. If they did, we'd sue for defamation and release even more damaging information we'd kept private. The letter mentioned specifically that we had evidence of financial crimes that could result in federal charges. They went silent after that. Completely silent. No more interviews, no more social media posts, no more attempts to contact me. They'd finally learned that I wasn't someone to be messed with. Mama Clara was sitting in her favorite chair when I told her everything Patricia had revealed. She listened quietly, then reached over and squeezed my hand. "Baby girl," she said softly, "some people are just broken inside. You can't fix them. All you can do is protect yourself and move on." And that's exactly what I did. 18 months after I walked away from Darius, I was standing on stage at the National Women in Business Conference, accepting an award for Entrepreneur of the Year. The ballroom was packed with over 2,000 people, all of them on their feet applauding as I held up this heavy glass trophy that caught the stage lights like a prism. Chambers Consulting Group had exploded beyond anything I'd imagined. We'd gone from 3 employees to 32, from 5 clients to over 100, from one small office to a full floor in a downtown high-rise with views that made visitors stop and stare. I was being featured in Forbes, in Fortune, in Business Insider. People were calling me a thought leader, a disruptor, a voice for financial empowerment, but the part I was most proud of, the part that actually meant something, I'd created a mentorship program specifically for women escaping financial abuse. Survivors who'd been controlled through money, who'd lost everything to manipulative partners, who didn't know how to start over. We gave them free consulting, helped them rebuild their credit, taught them how to protect their assets, and recognize red flags. We'd helped 47 women in the first year alone. One of them was Michelle, Darius's first wife. She'd reached out after seeing my story, and we'd met for coffee in this quiet corner of a cafe where she'd told me everything. How Darius had convinced her to put his name on her accounts, how he'd secretly taken out credit cards in her name, how she'd ended up $80 in debt and homeless, living in her car for 6 months before she could get back on her feet. She was doing better now, working as an accountant, slowly paying off the debt. But the trauma was still there in her eyes, this permanent wariness, like she was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. "We have to stop blaming ourselves," I told her that day. "We have to stop calling ourselves stupid for trusting people who promise to love us. Being kind isn't a weakness. Being trusting isn't a flaw. Taking advantage of someone's kindness, that's the flaw," Michelle had cried, and we'd become friends after that. Real friends. The kind who understood each other's scars without having to explain them. The mentorship program became the heart of what I did. Yes, I was making money. Yes, I was building an empire. But more importantly, I was using that empire to pull other women up with me, to show them what was possible when you stopped letting people drain you dry. Mama Clara was my biggest cheerleader through all of it. She'd recovered completely from her stroke, stronger than ever, and she'd started volunteering at Little Angels Foundation. She'd visit the kids waiting for surgery, read them stories, hold their hands when they were scared. The foundation ended up naming a wing after her, the Clara Chambers Recovery Center. When they unveiled the plaque, she'd sobbed so hard I thought she might have another stroke. But these were happy tears. Healing tears. My social life was different now, too. I'd started dating again, carefully, taking things slow. I'd met a man named Marcus at a charity event, a civil rights attorney who worked with nonprofit organizations and didn't ask me for a single dollar. We'd been seeing each other for 6 months, and he was patient and kind. And nothing like Darius. He made me laugh. He made me feel safe. He met Mama Clara and passed her test, which was more important than any background check. But I wasn't in a hurry to remarry. Maybe I would eventually. Maybe I wouldn't. The difference was that now I knew I didn't need a partner to feel complete. I was whole all by myself. I'd also reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. People I'd drifted away from because Darius had always found reasons why we couldn't make it to their events, or why they weren't good influences. Turned out they'd been worried about me for years, but hadn't known how to say it without driving me away. Now we had regular girls' nights, wine and laughter, and the kind of honest conversations I'd been starving for. One evening, about 20 months after the divorce, I was having dinner with Shanice at this upscale restaurant downtown. We were celebrating her promotion, toasting with champagne, and splitting some ridiculously expensive seafood platter. That's when I saw them through the window. Darius, Geneva, and Monique walking down the street outside. They looked rough. Darius had lost weight in an unhealthy way, his clothes hanging off him like he'd forgotten how to take care of himself. Geneva looked 10 years older, her hair gray and unstyled, wearing a coat that had seen better years. Monique was hunched over her phone, walking like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. They passed right by the restaurant, not even looking in. They had no idea I was there, sitting in the warm light, drinking expensive champagne, laughing with my best friend. Shanice saw them too. "Girl," she whispered, "do you want to leave?" I watched them disappear into the evening crowd, these people who'd once controlled so much of my life, and now had absolutely no power over me at all. "No," I said, turning back to my friend with a smile. "I'm exactly where I want to be." We kept eating, kept laughing, kept celebrating life. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight but my own. But the universe wasn't done teaching Darius his lesson yet. 2 years after I left Darius, I got a call I'd been waiting for. The producer from Good Morning America wanted me to appear on their show as part of a segment about women entrepreneurs who'd overcome adversity. They'd been following my story and wanted to feature my work with the mentorship program. This was national television. Millions of viewers, the kind of exposure that could take Chambers Consulting Group to the next level. I said yes immediately. The interview aired on a Thursday morning in September. I wore a deep blue suit that Mama Clara had helped me pick out, my natural hair styled in elegant twists, and I felt more confident than I ever had in my life. The host was warm and genuine, asking thoughtful questions about my journey from corporate CFO to business owner, about the challenges I'd faced and overcome. When she asked about the inspiration behind my mentorship program for abuse survivors, I'd kept it professional but honest. I spoke about recognizing patterns of financial control and manipulation, about the importance of protecting yourself legally, about how leaving a toxic situation isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I never mentioned Darius by name. Never had to. Anyone who'd followed my story knew exactly what I was talking about. The segment ended with footage of the mentorship program in action. Women sitting in our conference room learning about credit scores and asset protection and how to rebuild after devastation. The final shot was of me and Mama Clara at the Little Angels Foundation, reading to a little boy who was waiting for his surgery. The segment went viral within hours. My website crashed from traffic. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests, client inquiries, women asking to join the mentorship program. By the end of the week, I had been contacted by 3 literary agents who wanted me to write a book. A book. About my life, my business, my journey. It was overwhelming and thrilling and terrifying all at once. But the best part, the part that felt like cosmic justice, 2 weeks after the GMA appearance, I was driving through downtown on my way to a client meeting. I stopped at a red light, and there it was. A massive digital billboard, the kind that dominates the skyline and costs a fortune to rent. My face was on it. 20 feet tall, smiling, with text that read, "Zuri Chambers, Businesswoman of the Year, Building Empires, Changing Lives." Dawa, it was an ad campaign from the Business Journal that had given me the award. They'd put up billboards all over the city, and this one happened to be right next to a construction site. I sat at that red light, staring up at my own giant face, feeling surreal and proud and grateful. And then I looked to my right. There was Darius, standing at the construction site in a hard hat and a neon safety vest, covered in dust and dirt, holding a shovel. He'd frozen mid-step, staring up at the billboard with his mouth hanging open. He looked older than his 38 years, weathered and exhausted and so much smaller than I remembered him being. For a moment, our eyes met through my car window. His face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, recognition, shame, anger, disbelief, defeat. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. just looked at him with the same neutral expression I'd give any stranger, then turned my attention back to the road. The light turned green, and I drove away in my sleek black luxury sedan, climate control on, music playing softly, heading toward the high-rise district where my office waited. In my rearview mirror, I could see Darius still standing there, still staring up at that billboard, a statue of regret holding a shovel he probably couldn't afford to drop. I didn't feel sorry for him, not even a little bit. You make your choices, and then your choices make you. He'd chosen to be a parasite. Now, he got to live with being one. That evening, I told Mama Claire about the billboard moment. She was in her kitchen making her famous sweet potato pie, and she just smiled this knowing smile while she rolled out the dough. "Baby girl," she said without looking up, "that man had every opportunity to build something real with you. He chose shortcuts instead. Now, he gets to watch you fly while he stays stuck on the ground." She was right. And watching him realize that, watching it sink into his bones, that he'd thrown away something priceless for something worthless, that was better than any revenge I could have planned. The next day, I signed the book deal. 6 figures for my story, tentatively titled Rising: How I Built an Empire from the Ashes of Betrayal. The publisher was thrilled. My agent was thrilled. I was terrified but excited. Marcus took me to dinner to celebrate, and over dessert, he asked the question I'd been half expecting and half dreading. "Are you ever going to tell me exactly what your ex-husband did? I mean, I know the public version. But what really happened?" I looked at this kind, patient man who'd never once tried to control me or take from me or diminish me, and I told him everything. Every detail, every betrayal, every moment of the nightmare I'd lived through with Darius and his family. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm glad you survived him," he said simply. "The world needs more women like you and fewer men like him." That's when I knew I was going to marry Marcus someday. Not because I needed him, but because I wanted him. Because he saw me as whole and strong and worthy, and he never tried to make me smaller to make himself feel bigger. But before I could build that future, I had one final piece of my past to address. 3 years after I left Darius, I was standing in my office on the 30th floor, watching the sun set over the city and thinking about how far I'd come. Chambers Consulting Group now had offices in 3 cities. My book had been on the bestseller list for 8 weeks. The mentorship program had helped over 200 women rebuild their lives. I'd been invited to speak at the United Nations about economic empowerment and gender equity. Mama Claire was healthier and happier than ever, traveling the world and volunteering and living the retirement she deserved. Marcus and I had gotten engaged 6 months earlier in a quiet proposal that made me cry happy tears for the first time since I could remember. Everything in my life had transformed. I was unrecognizable from the exhausted, depleted woman who'd sat in that hospital hallway 3 years ago, wondering if anyone would ever show up for her. My assistant knocked on the door and poked her head in. "Ms. Chambers, there's a Geneva Walker in the lobby asking to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Should I have security remove her? My hand froze on my coffee cup. Geneva? After 3 years of silence, she'd shown up at my office. I could have said yes, could have had her escorted out, could have maintained the boundary I'd worked so hard to establish. But something made me curious. What could she possibly have to say after all this time? "Send her up," I said, "but tell security to stay close." 5 minutes later, Geneva walked into my office. She looked like she'd aged a decade. Her hair was completely gray now, cut short in a practical style that had nothing to do with fashion. Her clothes were clean but worn. No designer labels, no expensive jewelry, none of the polished armor she used to wear like a second skin. She stood in the doorway, looking around at my success, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. "Zuri," she said quietly, "thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What do you want, Geneva?" She sat down carefully, folding her hands in her lap like a child called to the principal's office. "I came to apologize. I know it's too late. I know you have every reason to never forgive me. But I needed to say it anyway." I leaned back in my chair and waited. Let her talk. "I was terrible to you," she continued, her voice shaking. "I treated you like a bank account instead of a person. I raised my son to think women were there to serve him. I taught Monique that manipulation was a survival skill. I destroyed my family because I was greedy and selfish and cruel. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. And for the first time, I saw her as human instead of monstrous. Just a broken woman who'd made terrible choices and was finally facing the consequences. Darius is gone, she said. He left the country 6 months ago. Couldn't find work, couldn't handle the shame. He's somewhere in Mexico working under the table. Monique and I barely speak. She blames me for ruining her life. And she's right to. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence sit between us. I'm working 3 jobs now, Geneva continued. Trying to pay off debts, trying to survive, and every day I see your face somewhere. On billboards, in magazines, on television, and every day I'm reminded that I had a good daughter-in-law, and I threw her away because I was too stupid to see her value. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry. I studied her for a long moment. This woman who'd made my life hell for 7 years, who'd demanded my money and my time and my dignity without ever giving anything back. Part of me wanted to throw her out. Part of me wanted to tell her exactly how much damage she'd caused. But mostly, I just felt tired of carrying the weight of other people's mistakes. I appreciate the apology, I said finally. I really do. But it doesn't change anything. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. Just like I get to live with mine. Geneva nodded, more tears falling. I understand. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I hope you find peace, Geneva. I really do, but you won't find it with me. She stood too, moving toward the door. Before she left, she turned back one more time. For what it's worth, she said softly. You deserved so much better than what we gave you, and your mother is lucky to have you. Then she left, and I never saw her again. I stood at my window after she was gone, watching the city lights come on one by one as darkness fell. I thought about forgiveness and justice and revenge and healing. Thought about the woman I used to be and the woman I'd become. The truth was, I didn't forgive Geneva, or Darius, or Monique. Maybe I would someday. Maybe I wouldn't. But I'd learned that forgiveness wasn't required for moving forward. I could acknowledge the harm they'd caused, accept that they were suffering their own consequences, and still choose to focus on building my own beautiful life without them in it. That evening, I went home to the penthouse apartment I'd bought overlooking the river. Marcus was there, cooking dinner and singing badly to old Motown songs. Mama Clara was visiting, showing us photos from her recent trip to Egypt. We ate together and laughed together and made plans for the future. After they left, I stood on my balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the city that had watched me fall apart and put myself back together. I thought about that night in the hospital when I'd sent $50 instead of $15,000. That one small act of defiance that had changed everything. I thought about the version of me who'd believed love meant sacrifice, who'd believed being a good wife meant emptying herself to fill up other people. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more whole. My phone buzzed with a text from the literary agent. Your book just hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Congratulations! I smiled and typed back a thank you. Then I pulled up my banking app and made my quarterly donation to Little Angels Foundation, $25 this time, in honor of Mama Clara, like always. The confirmation came through and I took a screenshot, not to prove anything to anyone, not to post on social media or show off, just to remember, to have evidence of the moment when I chose to use my power to save lives instead of to sustain people who were slowly killing me. Somewhere out there, Darius was in Mexico, probably still blaming me for his failures. Monique was probably still crying about her canceled wedding and her lost luxury. Geneva was working 3 jobs and learning what real exhaustion felt like. And me? I was here, living proof that you can survive betrayal. You can rebuild after devastation. You can take the pieces of your shattered life and make something beautiful from the shards. The city lights twinkled like stars, and I made myself a promise. I would never again make myself small to make someone else comfortable. I would never again sacrifice my peace for someone else's convenience. I would never again confuse love with servitude. I was done being an ATM with legs. I was done being the strong Black woman who carried everyone else's weight without complaint. I was done giving pieces of myself away until there was nothing left. From now on, I was building an empire on my own terms, loving people who loved me back, and living a life that honored the woman I'd fought so hard to become. And if that made me selfish, if that made me cold, if that made me the villain in someone else's story, then so be it. I'd rather be the villain in their story than the victim in mine. Before I close this chapter of my life, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me what city or state you're tuning in from. And if this story resonated with you, if you've been that person giving until there's nothing left, or if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who needs permission to put themselves first. Because sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you can do is save yourself. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Now go build your own empire.